budget adoption and the property tax report card. And we vote on May 18th from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. here at Whitwell. All of our information is on our school district website. And are there any questions?
Any questions from the board concerning the budget presentation? Mr. Formeyer? Hey, Jackie.
Hi.
We're anticipating an additional $560K in state aid based on recent news.
That's correct.
Correct. Now that $560K would be in addition to the $16,543 that we already have
Exactly right.
on the revenue side.
That's correct.
So that number would bump up to roughly $7,100.
Correct.
Okay. Do we have any indication from the state as to whether or not that bump up will stay for the following years, or is it a one-time deal, or do you have any way of gauging that?
Well, of the $560,000, $440,000 of it is tied to foundation aid.
Okay.
Typically, foundation aid is intended to stick around. The other expense-based aids fluctuate with our spending pattern and other pieces.
How much was that? 400?
$440,000 is tied to foundation aid. So based on a set of assumptions, one would assume those would stay around. I don't like to assume. We don't know for sure.
Right.
But it's more solid than a normal just fluke increase, I would say, the 440. The rest of the increase you're seeing is tied to building aid. We're getting more aid on the projects that we're getting done this year.
Okay.
So that's not to stay per se.
Okay, so if we were to consider taking that 440 on the revenue side and using it to reduce the tax levy, we could bring the levy down. Didn't do the calculation, doing the calculation based on 560, which would be about 46%. This would be somewhat less because I'm not looking to suggest that we get too risky, but if we were to take money that is coming in this year and we're reasonably certain is going to come in over the next few years and push it back in the revenue side and reduce the tax levy, we could essentially bring the tax levy down by 440K or whatever percentage that.
That's correct. Okay.
Any other questions from the board concerning the budget presentation? Mr. Scrito?
Is there a reason, Mr. Carroll, we wouldn't do that?
Not necessarily. It's a philosophy from the Board of Education what you want to do.
I know you're my business person, so you're supposed to tell me give me a good reason why and why not.
Well, the reason you would want to do it is it's newfound money. In all fairness, it's the 11th hour. We just found money from the state last week, and we pretty much have a budget that we're pretty solid with. So one could then reduce the tax levy for it. That's fine. It makes sense.
If we didn't, it'll end up in reserves.
Correct. It'll go into reserves, right? If you don't, you will end up getting the money. It'll go into reserves next year, and it helps give flexibility of funding the budget in future years. That's fine. One reason you may not want to do it, which is why we haven't done it in recent years, is just that the lower you make the tax levy, if you go under the cap is good, right? The cap sets a bar for us to reach and make sure we don't exceed that cap. Once you go purposefully underneath that cap, you're starting the next year's cap at a lower amount, which, yes, that's less money. However, you kind of start to lose the flexibility in your program needs in future years because you're starting that cap that I showed you, the calculation, at a lower number. So you kind of accelerate the ability, this formula here, you accelerate the need to kind of make programmatic and staffing choices in years where the budget, the cap is really tight.
What stops us from levying to the cap and then issuing a refund?
I think the end result is the same, isn't it?
No.
Mechanism. I don't think there's a
I don't
mechanism.
think there's a way to do that.
Yeah, I don't think there's an actual mechanism.
To give money back. I don't think-
Correct.
Why? We did it in the past.
Did?
Didn't we? Didn't
You mean
community members get a refund check as a result of aid or something coming in after the fact?
That's correct. That has to do with a formula that didn't come directly from the district. The district didn't pay the check, but the community received checks if we were compliant with the tax cap. There's an initiative of New York State to support the tax cap during those years, so 3 to 4 years.
Incentive.
So if we realize the money, 560,000, 440,000, whatever it is, after we set our budget and it becomes extra revenue, there's no mechanism to return that to taxpayers?
You could use appropriated fund balance, which is a revenue. It's not really that because often people think of it as, here, I'll go back to the slide with the revenue, sorry. fund balance in the bottom of the top half. We currently give back $3.6 million in the budget that's in front of us for revenue. Dollar-wise, we do offset raising taxes by using some of our savings of fund balance to give back to lower that tax. We do that. So if that's the mechanism you're thinking of, that is the mechanism the district would use to reduce the tax levy with saved dollars.
What I'm asking is there a way, that's not the mechanism I'm asking about, I'm asking whether there's a way to hard cash back to the taxpayers for the extra money that we didn't think we were going to get. Is there a way to do that without messing with the basis for the following years?
To my knowledge, no. Council might have any other.
I agree. I know no such thing.
Does that mean it doesn't exist, or we don't know?
Is it a gift of public funds? It sounds like.
Mr. Dr. Harris, I think, sorry, I think.
Is that you?
I guess the question I have is,
If I could just,
go ahead.
sorry. Have we had bump ups in foundation aid like this before? Is this an odd occurrence? It seems like it is.
It is unique, and the amount of federal aid
Because
that they're
normally
pushing
I
out
wouldn't go
is
down a
unique.
path of saying we want to lower the base on the tax levy because it's a gift that keeps on giving.
It's exactly right. It is unique.
But if we
yes.
have a bump up in state and foundation aid that's going to stay with us, then.
I don't know, but the promise is to retain that.
Okay.
Foundation aid typically doesn't change.
So typically, but you don't have anything
No.
from the state that says you can expect this in 21, 22, and 22, 23?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay.
Well, we have a proposed budget that didn't take into account this extra money,
Right.
right?
That's correct.
So there's no mechanism not to squirrel that away?
Well, we put it in reserve.
That's squirreling it away. We put
Yes.
millions in reserve last year.
Yes.
There's no way to reduce property taxes, using that money to reduce property taxes?
Yeah, if you put it in the revenue side, you'd have to redo.
Gary, I love you, but I'm not asking.
You could use it as a revenue in another area. So if you showed the increase in the reserve line, sure, they would be having an additional reserve appropriation and it would reduce the levy.
As Mr. Barchet is asking, Mrs. Pure, I guess the question is, because it seems like a slippery slope, what you're describing to us, the board, thankful to the people that came, the people that are listening here, that you're always going to keep increasing that because the system is broken. The system is saying you always have to basically max it out every year, otherwise it hurts you. And as a taxpayer, I got to be honest with you, that stinks.
I hear you. I agree. I see that it's a formula. It gives you a cap. And one philosophy is to raise the dollars through the cap. So you keep all the program and staffing that the district needs. If you find yourself in a position to not need certain things and not need to go to the cap, that's another conversation. This year's a little unique. To Mr. Fortmeyer's point, it's a little unique.
It's $3 million. I remember the $500,000. Maybe I read it wrong.
There was three pieces.
Yeah, so is there
Maybe
another
you could
$3 million?
Maybe you could explain the three pieces. There was a
Sure.
grant
Yeah.
and then the foundation aid.
Sure can. So what the news was just last week from the state, they set their budget, which we know, and impacts Hauppauge, $560,000 on the revenue side as far as state aid projections. Remember, it's only projections. It's not cash in hand until the end of the fiscal year 22, first of all. The other piece are, there's two federal grants that are coming down the pike for us. The Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, CRRSA. Our allocation for that acronym is just over $3 million, $3,061,160. The other federal grant is called the American Rescue Plan, ARP, is $969,092. This is not to be confused with general fund money. This is federal funds, which means we outlay the dollars to a specific plan that the federal government will state for us how we can spend it, how much we can spend it, how fast we can spend it or draw down from it for particular areas. Usually very specific, very targeted areas. For this, being that these two items are pandemic related, we expect it to be for learning loss that may have occurred during the last 18 months or so. So we expect it to be for summer programs, perhaps reading or what have you. Dr. Murphy and Dr. Howard are working a little bit more on that. But they are going to want a specific plan to New York State by July 1st of this year of how the district intends to spend those $4 million, separate and apart from the operating budget. Some of it will be supplemental, some of it is a plant. We don't have all the final guidance on those federal funds yet, but that's what those dollars are about. It's amazing, it's unique. I haven't been in the industry all that long, but colleagues of mine have been doing this 30, 40 years and they've never seen in the business office ever this type of aid for each district. So obviously you know why. This is a unique year and a half that's really detrimental to the learning process. And they're showing up with dollars. So some of those dollars too, no, it's not just a 1-year time limit. I believe some of them are over a 3-year period with possible 1-year extensions to draw down on those funds. So it's not like we have $4 million to spend now in the next 12 months. That's not the case. And again, we have to outlay the money and then recoup it through the grant process over a period of time.
And
This is interesting. We keep saying federal money, but we have to remember federal money is our money.
Of course.
So we pay the taxes, so it's not like
They get it
Joey
from somewhere.
Biden's giving me extra money.
Mrs. Pirro,
Dr. O'Hara, I don't know if anyone else, we can't hear what you're saying. Steve, is there a way to fix that?
You could probably put it back up on the screen. Jackie's done it.
Can you try saying something now?
Yeah, I was saying regarding the federal grants. Is that any better volume-wise?
No, it's not.
Can
Okay.
he call in? Do we have a phone that he can call in on and use the audio
No,
that
it's
way?
okay. You know what? Just tell him I'll send Mrs. Pirro or Dr. Murphy a text, and then they could just.
This is beyond annoying.
Yeah.
He's gonna send it.
Dennis, can he call in, Steve?
Yeah.
And shut off the microphone on his computer so we don't hear it twice?
Okay, we'll work on that. What was the number for the ARP?
ARP is $969,092, 969,092.
Jackie, is it fair to say that those numbers will never show up on this?
That's correct.
This
Separate, yep,
totally
exactly
separate.
right.
We spend the money, we get it back.
Hello?
Right,
Hey.
He's gotta mute his microphone.
Okay.
on his computer.
Okay, I don't know if you folks can hear me now.
Can you,
I think I did. Oh, hang on. Nope. Okay. Good. Can you hear me, Steve?
Yes.
Okay. The only thing I wanted to add, I wasn't sure if Mrs. Pirro said it, that with those federal grants, some of the guidelines spell out that the money has to be used for things that are not recurring costs. So it's not as if that's money that you can count on indefinitely in the future.
So what Dr. O'Hara said, that some of the costs that he's referring to, that we're talking about federal funds, for these specific grants are one-time only use, not reoccurring. So specific for the summer of X to do a summer program, they're not something that's meant to, reoccur. So it wouldn't go in an operational budget. Just the
Was it
grants.
not, Mrs. Pirro, to reimburse, ma'am, for the schools, for the spit guards, the temperature things? Was it not that part of the plan to reimburse the school for that, ma'am?
It may. We had the CARES Act, remember, this is the two newest grants. We also had the CARES Act, that's in the current year we're in. That grant that came through, GEAR funds and the other acronym that they used, was to help us pay for some of those items. However, that grant was part of our state aid run. It wasn't additional money. They told us it was federal, but they told us what we had to spend it on, which lucky for us, we already had items that were in our budget that we planned on purchasing with the state aid that we were getting, but now it's called federal money. We have to apply for it, but we use it to pay for things that are already in our budget. Help with social emotional learning. I think it paid for the psychologist and and some of the actual technology that we purchased this year was covered with that grant. Chromebooks, yeah, the technology was covered. But it wasn't additional money. It was part of our state aid run this year of the CARES Act funding that paid for those things to your point.
I'll just add, when it comes to the CRRSA,
Yes.
some specific,
$3 million one.
yeah, that's the bigger one, some specific wording here. planning and implementing activities related to summer learning, supplemental after-school programs, providing classroom instruction during summer months, addressing the needs of low-income students, students with disabilities, English learners. In the assistant soup circles, we're still kind of working through the ramifications of
And
all this.
that could include things like summer transportation, possibly.
That was talked about, but we're waiting on clarification, but I think you're right about that, Gary.
Narrower thing, Dr. Murphy.
There's actually much more to it. It's just I'm giving you a sense. There's some broad strokes here about learning loss, and so there's a lot that could fit underneath that umbrella.
The only reason I brought it back up, Mrs. Pirro, being the fiscal conservative that I am, and sorry about that, that's just who I am. The well's running dry. I say this every time. And, it's very easy to say because the way the culture is that we have to keep spending 2%, 2%. I just don't know if that's the answer. So I just, as Mr. Fortmeyer says, I think we have to look outside the box.
Well, the budget was already set. We have that increased cost of the budget to match that additional revenue that may come.
With additional money coming in, so
Yeah.
that $440,000, Mr. Fortmeyer, is that correct? Thank you.
Sure.
Very much.
Any further questions from the board concerning the budget presentation? Questions from the community concerning the budget presentation? Thank you. 5C on the agenda is the adoption of minutes in the budget business meeting of March 23rd, 2021. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Scarito, Mr. Fortmeyer with the second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, abstention? Gary, what was your vote?
I'll go with aye.
Aye, 7-0, 6-0. This is Weisberg absent. Questions and comments from the community concerning tonight's agenda only? Are there any items that members would like to have removed from the consent agenda? Mr. Kylie?
7.3C3 and C4.
7.3 C3 and C4. Any others? With that, I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda minus 7.3 C3 and 4. Mr. Buscarino makes a motion. Mr. Fortmeyer seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor? 6-0. Mr. Kiley, can 3 and 4 be handled together, or do you want them separate?
Oh, yeah, together's fine.
7.3 C3 and 4, I'll make the motion. Mr. Scarito seconds. Any discussion? Mr. Kiley?
Yeah, can you just, I'm just curious what exactly this is, and I've looked at it, just trying to read it a little bit, but just kind of
Sure.
more info on it.
Yeah, I can take it. We partner with different local universities and colleges and have graduate students who come to support through internships in our district. So throughout the year, it could be interns in the for social workers, interns for DPT, interns for
Is it a paid?
no,
Oh.
yeah. We have student teachers, we have student observers. So now we have these contracts in place to address EDLAW 2D and other language.
So the contractual agreement,
There's
there's nothing with,
No problem.
There's no cost or anything.
compensation, okay.
Correct.
Okay. And now, Fordham is new, right? This is a new contract? Fordham University?
We've partnered with them before. They reach out to us. So perhaps even earlier this year. Each one of these generates kind of a new set of paperwork.
Mr. Kiley, any other questions?
That's it. Thanks.
Debate is closed. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? 6-0. That concludes the consent agenda. Number 8, policies. For first reading, Mr. Tasman, this is an inordinate amount of policies for first reading. Are these all related? And just give us an overview of what these are.
Sure, thanks, Mr. Barchet. So, yes, these policies are all related. It's part of our policy committee charge this year. We looked closely at our special education policies. We worked hard, Ms. Bilski and our attorneys at Lehman Bernanke worked really hard to ensure that all our policies are aligned with NYSBA's new guidance and new policies. NYSBA has a whole slew of new policies, so we wanted to align ourselves with those policies. We followed all regulations, and we're never out of practice with following regulations and guidance, but our policies were in need of updating. So we took this opportunity to take our 8 special education policies and update them as per NYSBA's guidance, as we often do with many of our policies. That's what you have ahead of you.
Any comments from anyone concerning the policies? Those are returned to the policy committee to be proposed at our next meeting for a second reading.
Thank you.
Number 9 is the budget adoption. Do I have a motion? Mr. Carafa with the motion, Mr. Scarito with the second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes 4-2. Mr. Barchet and Mr. Kiley voting no. School property tax report card. Ms. Pirro, this is a ministerial act that we have to do every year?
That's correct.
I'll take a motion to approve the superintendent's recommendation for the 2021-2022 school property tax report card. Mr. Kraft with the motion, Mr. Kiley seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor? 6-0. Skipping committee reports this evening. They'll be put on the next agenda. Discussion matters there are no new business. Do any board members have new business they'd like to discuss? Mr. Scarito?
Dr. Arrow or anybody else on the administrative, some new guidelines came out as far as the distance in the classrooms going from 6 feet to 3 feet, and possibly removing the spit guards and stuff like that. I'm trying to think what else I've written here. Is that something that has to be voted on as a board? Is that something that has to be decided by the community? It wasn't pretty explicit.
Dennis, I don't know if you heard that.
Yes.
You want to talk about the meeting we had today?
Yeah, you folks able to hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Yeah, Dr. Murphy and I had a meeting today with 2 representatives from the Department of Health. We were reviewing questions just like this. So in part, Mr. Scarito, in part, we will survey the community. It'll be a pretty basic question. If everybody decides to return to schools in September, the required distance between students has been reduced from 6 feet to 3 feet. Given this fact, will your child be returning to school, or do you wish your child to stay home on distance learning? So my understanding is it's not something that requires a board vote or a board approval, but it does require us to get parent involvement via a survey at a minimum.
They also did recommend, you were correct, Mr. Scarito, that about the screen guards, not, that the research has shown that they're not effective.
My only concern, and this is where I have to trust my administration and, well, I trust Dr. Crawford for this stuff, it is the health things. Students in our community come first to me, and I know that in certain school districts, the thing is on the way up again. So we seem to be doing well with it. I don't know if we should be removing, I guess Dr. Crawford calls it barriers. So I'm just, I have to trust you on your guidance, because I also understood for graduation now, we can go up to 500 people, if that's correct?
Yeah.
Yes, depending on.
Regarding,
Go ahead, sorry.
regarding those recommendations, Mr. Scarito, what I understand is that studies have shown that schools that had students at 6 feet away compared to those with students 3 feet away, did not fare any better regarding transmission within the schools. And I also understand the data was very similar. The two ladies explained to us today that schools that had the plastic shields did not fare any better than schools that did not have the plastic shields. The secret sauce seems to be the mask wearing. So in terms of trusting us, we're as good as the data that CDC provides us. We'll make decisions, related to that data. I can tell you that since the pandemic began, every decision we make is toward the conservative side. I believe that it's prudent to err on the side of caution. We'll continue to do that. I think that was most of your question. I forgot what the second part was.
Well, can I add something?
Of course.
Is there any rush to do it right now?
That's my question.
Why don't we wait till the summer? We're probably gonna have a really good summer and then see what happens.
Are they saying we have to do this, or is it?
Dr. Kraffer, we don't have to, based on the sizes of our buildings, our class sizes, et cetera, we're not in a rush to change anything. We're just preparing for this for September in the event that.
That's fine, that's all I wanted to hear.
The numbers of students come back. If the numbers that come back to full-time requires a distance smaller than 6 feet, we'll be prepared for that. But we don't have to change in the short term because of the logistics and the layouts we already have in place. Just to be clear though with everybody, in some of our elementary classrooms, the students are already slightly closer than 6 feet. It's been like that for many months now.
And Dr. O'Hara, if I just may ask her, as far as the graduation for the parents that have seniors, will the plans be changing, Dr. O'Hara, as far as my understanding was they either have to have a negative COVID test or be vaccinated? And if that is the policy, who will be checking this little white card that's about 2 inches?
So the best I can do on that, and I think we have 5 or 6 people who wrote questions into the document regarding graduation, stepping up ceremonies, and the prom, is that we want to provide our students as traditional an experience as is possible. We want to give them all of the attention and accolades and recognition that they deserve. This guidance is new as of Friday, so we're working to get our heads around it. We also discussed some of that information in our meeting today. And so information will be forthcoming. It's just that this information is so new that we don't have all the details squared away yet, but you can rest assured that we will, and we will be working diligently to give the best ceremonies and prom experience that we can.
No, and I understand and I appreciate that. Just as long as we can give the community enough notice, Dr. O'Hara, because if for those that aren't vaccinated, sir, for those that have to get the COVID test, I'm going through with my wife right now, registering for this on the computer is still a nightmare. It's not, 1, 2, 3, and I'd hate for a parent to miss out on a graduation because of a restriction. That's all I ask, sir.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I can tell you that I'm in total agreement with you, and we'll be working as quickly as we can to make sure we understand it, and then we'll act accordingly.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Kraft, quick question about these testing days, especially the ones in the high school. Are we looking to eliminate keeping students home next year when the tests are going on? I know we did it a lot this year because of the space. And we have a lot of space in the high school. I just cringe when I hear more distance days or options for distance days in the fall. We need to get away from that as much as possible. So,
No, I don't, yeah, I think our goal is to have students back next year, of course, within the guidelines that we're allowed, but we all know that the best instruction is when students are on site.
and the test days, are we looking to have the students come to school that aren't taking the test next year? I know
Dr.
they're
Kraft,
right.
if I could chime in for a second, I think what you're asking is on the day we administer an SAT or an ACT, am I correct?
Oh,
The other grade levels, can they
Yeah.
come to school?
Right. So this year, it's assuming that the board still agrees in the value of having those in-school tests. We shared with the board data that shows the benefits of that. So assuming the board still agrees, we would recommend that you continue with that practice.
Yeah, I'm not questioning that practice. I want to know if the other students will be able to go to school.
So, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I understand that.
Larry,
The challenge in the,
Subject to not violating the law, those decisions are ours, no one else's.
Right, that's why I'm asking.
Correct.
When I say ours, I'm talking about us 7, or whatever we look like. We make.
You're saying that we should vote on that?
We make those decisions, yes. We take into account the recommendations of administration and make sure we're not breaking the laws as far as the Suffolk County Health Department, but we make those decisions.
So you're saying,
The way we did this year.
This year we did not have enough space in the high school where we would have violated the distance rules?
This year, we
Yes.
relied on recommendations from our administrators, like we probably will next year as well. But ultimately, if we don't agree with that, the decision is ours.
It's not just about space, it's this year, it's logistics and it's all of it.
Hey, guys.
This year is just.
Plus, we have no idea what it's gonna look like next year as far as
Next year will be a lot
the
easier.
pandemic goes. Right, I mean, a lot of this is gonna be guided by whether there's a surge or not, or whether this is a thing of the past. And whether we've had herd immunity or not. But those decisions.
I agree with all that. I think we need to, as much as within our control, limit these distance days. I just, my kids have been going to school, for kids that, have been in school, they've had a lot of distance days if you add them up for throughout the year. I'm just looking to limit that with someone who believes they should be back.
I think that we have all been on the same page since day one. Look around at what we've done compared to other districts.
And the reason I'm bringing it up is let's start planning now. If it's a logistical problem, a space problem, we have a huge district, we have a huge high school with empty rooms.
Yeah.
Let's figure it out.
So administration and the board have both made very clear that they believe in-person learning is irreplaceable, and we need to do everything we can, and continue to do everything we can to maximize in-person learning and minimize distance stays. So we're all on the same
Make sure we
page.
don't become complacent. It's very easy to flip on that switch and say, just do a distance day instead of figuring out the logistics of these empty rooms. I get that it's work, right, to do that, but
If we become complacent, it's no one's fault but yours and mine and the other 5 of us. So we can't pass the buck on that.
Mr. Barchet, can I just add?
Absolutely.
Okay, Dr. Kraft, it's not, just to be clear for everybody, it's not logistics, and we're certainly not, our high school administration is certainly not complacent. Part of the challenge this year is.
I never said that. I don't want that on the record.
No.
I'm not blaming anyone. I'm trying to plan for the future.
No.
I think we're all
Right.
tired of this 14 months into it. I'm just looking for next year.
Right, I'm just trying to explain what the challenge has been so that everybody understands it. We've been under the mandate of a 6-foot distance, and when we give these in-school tests to a full grade, there's students who get extended time, there's students who get readers. We can only fit X number of students in the gymnasium, so it's the 6-foot distance that has really been a challenge that we've struggled to overcome. With the 3-foot distance in the future, and as Mr. Barchet said, if we're doing better with the vaccinations and so on, we'll work as hard as we can to make sure that we don't have distance days on the.
I'm just going to ask some
test.
questions out of ignorance. But these tests, how are they different than the tests we administer for regular courses? Or do we bring in other students from other districts for these test days? Well, I'm just trying to figure out where the need for all of a sudden extra space comes from on a test day versus if they take a history test.
Dr. Probst might be able to help.
Sure.
She may be able to help a little bit, but basically, Larry, on some of these days, we're testing 300 students at one time, or several hundred at one time. And on a typical school day, tests are happening inside everybody's classrooms over the course of 9 periods. So it's a different challenge.
So when we administer the SAT or the ACT, we don't have control over how that can be administered. We have to adhere to College Board or ACT's rules for administration. When we give a test to a whole grade level, for example, one of the really great benefits of that is that all of our students participate, including students with disabilities, who apply for test accommodations. In any one of those administrations, we could have 30 students that are approved to test one-on-one, one kid in a room. We could have students who ACT or College Board says can't have more than 5 students in a room. They tell us what distance can be from one student's head to the next student's head. So it's all of those factors that come into play. To your question of is it any different than a history test? It is a little different because we have to follow their rules, not just ours. So that's part of the challenge.
So it's our students, no students
Only
from out
our
of the.
students on those days, only our
I'm just trying
students.
to figure out the swell here. It's okay,
Sure.
as long as we're working on it for next year and thinking about it.
Well,
Thank you.
and, you know, I mean, the challenge here, if you think about it, we've administered these school day exams for 4 years now. This is the only year that we've ever had to shut down business as usual to make it happen. And it's because usually the way we make it work is that we use our large spaces. You know, we can put in a normal year 250 students who have standard time, no special considerations in the gym. But we can't do that right now. So you lose your big spaces. How do you, okay, where's our other big space? The commons. You can't have kids test in the commons. You've seen it, it's a fishbowl, and have the bell ring and kids walking past and stuff like that. So, so then you have to go into classroom spaces. And pretty quickly, you run out of classroom spaces when there's 700 other students who have to go to class. So that's part of the challenge.
Bless you.
Okay. Any further new business? New business from administration? Questions or comments from the community concerning anything related to the district whatsoever? Yes? If you could, yes. Hello?
Can you hear me at the minute?
Yes.
I just want to let you guys know, I'm not here to cause problems for administration or for any of our teachers. I'm not here to say to anybody, oh, I got you. I'm here because I need to know that I did everything possible to help the students in this district, like our Board of Ed members who volunteer a lot of their time. Our special education culture here desperately needs your help. Unfortunately, I had several horrible experiences here dealing with my own children. Top administrators would not help me and kept bouncing me back between each other. I educated myself in a fierce manner. I fought the district to pay for a neuropsychological exam. It was then when my child was already in 7th grade and the neuropsych came back did we come to realize his true diagnoses and how the district interventions were just pushing him through and were even detrimental. He chose to pay out of our pocket to help our son, as it would take the district years until they finally implemented some of what he needed. The IEP goals were not measurable or accurate to address his deficits. I fought every step of the way. It was a full-time job trying to ensure administration would allow the teachers to do what they knew needed to be done for my son. Why, as a parent, do we have to do all of this work? Why can we not trust our district's special education and regular education entities to do the right thing? I've had meetings with top administration. They have not done what they said they would. Our AIS system is completely broken. Students are left going to AIS reading for years without making progress to bridge the gap with their peers. The administration does not help the teachers. There should be recommendations for further reading testing after a year of intervention without sufficient progress. To my knowledge, there has never been a reading teacher who recommended further testing. It's not easy for them to do this unless the administration encourages this practice. And this is insane when 1 in 5 students have a reading disability. Students are home crying every night, hating school, being bullied, and have low self-esteem. Parents are crying, and they don't understand how to help their children. They are spending money on tutors who do not know how to help. No one is addressing their underlying deficits. Our IEPs, I've yet to see an IEP formulated here which had measurable and accurate goals for a student. I have yet to see a progress report by teachers which contain a summary and not just letters of PG or PS. There needs to be documentation as to why a child is or is not making progress. I have yet to see the district volunteer to perform other testing, which their primary testing has pointed to. For instance, if you have a regular psychological and the IQ exam has different subtests and is leaning towards an issue with reading where the kid can't spell, no one's sitting there at CSE unless a parent is fully educated on how to do this to say, hey, I need the Woodcock reading assessment. It's not being done unless parents know to fight for it. I can go on, but something needs to be done. Administrators need to be held accountable to this board to make change. The teachers need to be educated. We have continuing education for 2 programs in this district to excel, the AP and IB program. I have helped students with IEPs apply to colleges who will now be getting services at those colleges. I helped parents fill out those college forms and letters to assure those students would get what they need when they felt abandoned by our guidance department. Currently, parents are being told by this district that their children are just doing so well in school. I need you to see how accurate this statement is or isn't. High school parents are being made to think their student is excelling, yet when looking further into the grading system this year, this can be proven false. Tests and quizzes in some primary subjects are only counting as 20% towards grades. So when you have a student who's failing based on their tests and quizzes, some of them are ending up with 80s and 90s. How is this happening? We're pushing kids through like this is hard, not only on our students, but our parents. There's way too much fluff that's going on. I help too many people in this district through word of mouth about me. This is not something I ever wanted. I pay it forward because people help me out of kindness. And because when I hear these parents and I look at their students' testing and IEPs, my heart breaks. I don't want to see IEPs created by and checked by administration, which are in all honesty a disgrace. I don't want to see teachers not following IEPs because they have not been supported to understand what they mean. I don't want parents calling the state on our district and filling out state complaints. This district is failing our students with special needs. The special education culture here needs an overhaul. This cannot be done without your help. You need to be present at meetings between administrators and parents who know the system in order to hold our administration accountable to make the appropriate changes. Please do not let these children fail and these families cry. That's the only reason why I'm involved, and I can't turn it back. I have a bunch of letters.
No. You hand them up to the clerk, or Jimmy, if you could pass it to the clerk. So, I have a question for you, if you're up to it. And if you're not, you can tell me that you're not. But, you know, short of blowing up the entire PPS department, what concrete recommendations do you have that we can consider to allay some of the issues that you brought up? Because I do agree that our, you know, we're not perfect as a district.
No district is though.
Right, and in some areas, we're pretty far from perfect. But, and we appreciate you and others bringing those issues to our attention and certainly doing so in a professional way, which you have, so we appreciate that. Concrete suggestions or concrete things that you know you can suggest that the board work on.
Primarily, I'd like to see healing between the special education community and administration first, because I don't think anything is going to succeed until we can sit across from one another and agree to respect each other and to really be like, yeah, you know what, we're messing up on this, you know, and you know, at the same, on the parent side.
Yeah,
Like,
is SEPTA a good vehicle for that to happen, or are you saying that that portion of our outreach isn't working?
I think SEPTA is kind of separate from this. That's more of, fundraising and yes, some education, but it doesn't, it's very nerve wracking to be sitting in the SEPTA and knowing you only have a certain amount of time and, who's there that's really taking accountability from the district to make change, who's listening from your end. Like I've said, I've sat with administration here where we've gone through, oh, okay, how do you diagnose someone with dyslexia? Oh, okay, but we're gonna tell parents to go ahead and call their pediatrician. No, that's not how they get diagnosed. And I'm not saying that every child in here, we should pay for a neuropsychological, but we need to be able to sit down and come up with a plan that almost flow chart for teachers and for evaluators, that if we see this on a psychological, that we're then gonna recommend more testing, that we don't just stop unless someone comes with an advocate. That shouldn't be how we are, because then it just creates this tension, and I hate it. But I mean, teachers and even, I guess, psychologists need to understand what it is to write a measurable goal. That's very heartbreaking when I look at these IEPs and I'm like, how can anything even get done when I'm looking at a goal that I can't possibly understand? And let's say that's even in occupational therapy, and I'm an occupational therapist, and I'm still like, I really? There needs to be a lot of support from the top down. And it needs to be, I would think, a round table. I think bring everyone to the table, but understanding that we need to respect each other instead of fighting.
Mr. Scredo?
First of all, you were very well spoken. I just want to thank you for that. I have spoken with parents. I happen to be one of those parents. I remember going to my meetings. It's very intimidating. You being an attorney, you understand this. If somebody commits a crime and they don't have an attorney, they still give you somebody to represent you. I felt as a parent, I had nowhere to turn to. I wrote down when you were speaking, I almost feel like a child advocate should be appointed to a parent, or a list should be giving out to parents, because I know there's parents out there who don't know what their rights and their child rights are. And we're kind of thrown into a meeting with people that have the expertise that can really, I don't want to say step on us, but they can push us in a direction that we don't know if it's best for our child. So I agree with our community member. I think somewhere the school has to reach out, and we have to do better. We have to figure a way, Mr. Barchet. I think somewhere, and I'm not blaming the administration, I'm not blaming the teachers, we dropped the ball. The system is broken. We have to figure a way for those that need resources, how to seek them out and how to ask for them. And I'm just using that attorney thing. I know we don't have an attorney, they appoint somebody, and that person at least knows all the acronyms of what you have to do and not do to get, through that, sir.
Mr. Kiley?
So we do have a new director, right? Rebecca Bilski.
She's not so new.
Well, yeah. So, since I've been on the board, there's been many directors.
Yes.
Right, a few different directors, and some good, I guess, and whatever. But is she listening? Have you spoke with her? I'm curious. Is it the same old story?
It's the same old story when it comes to sitting in meetings, and it's as far as tell me how, based on psychological reports, the goals match up to the child's deficits. Tell me, based on reading this IEP, that a teacher could sit here and provide a parent with proof saying, we worked on goal number 1, and here is your child's work. There aren't any measurable goals unless someone's going through that, so it makes it very difficult. Ms. Bilski, she listens. I've been in CSEs with her, and sitting in a CSE with her, yes, she listens, and she's great, and she helps change, and she helps to sit there and develop these goals. But why is it still happening? I've been doing this now for...
It's her though, Jimmy.
I was going to ask.
I think Ms. Bilski is doing...
Yeah.
Is her hands tied, Ms. Mrs. Bilski?
I think the board has to start doing some measured things. I think Ms. Bilski is working.
Because this is a recurring theme every single year, right? And obviously, but I don't know where it starts. And now, I've heard great things about her,
Yes.
Ms. Bilski. So, I agree, I don't think it's her, but so where do we start?
But when the administration keeps seeing it at the meetings that I'm going to, and I'm not going to everybody's meeting, and when you're sitting there and every single meeting starts with, what's up with this IEP, and we're going
I
on
like
2
your
years
roundtable
now,
idea.
what are we doing?
We do.
Mrs. Danby, I want to thank you for your approach here, and I feel like you're coming with an angle of working together. You said, I'm not sure how you said it, I don't want to misstate it, but both sides are not looking to be adversarial and be collaborative. Thank you for what you said about Mrs. Bilski. She really is an empathetic, thoughtful leader. And Mr. Scrito, you talked about round table. So perhaps there's some dialoguing here that can come from your idea or your starting the conversation that can be productive. I know you said SEPTA is a separate organization, but I know you run in some of those circles, some of those same people there. Perhaps there's a way to thoughtfully pick some people on both sides to sit down and talk this through, almost like a brainstorming, think tank, to bridge some of the divides and repair some old war wounds. But I think the way you read your statement, I appreciate it. Perhaps it's a launching pad to some discussion here.
I can ask one last question.
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Scrito.
Gene, is there any legal reason why that if a parent has to go to an IEP that the school is not allowed to give out names of child advocates, and if they cannot pay for them, the school pays for it? I mean, similar to a court, if you can't pay for the attorney, they appoint one.
Well, certainly no prohibition about having a list of resources, but in terms of paying for it, there's no legal obligation to do so.
I'm not worried about legal obligation. I'm trying to do what's right for the community member and the students. In other words, if someone can't afford a service, then I don't understand
Well,
why.
isn't there a parent advocate on every CSE?
No,
No, I didn't get one.
no, that's different. You're talking about a parent member.
Parent member,
Very-
right, that is, because that's what I remember when I went through it, there was a
Yeah.
parent member.
They knew
That's
very little.
extremely different.
Like
And
the attorney.
Right, so
the
listen,
thing I don't like about advocates, even myself being there, is that I never want anyone to feel like we're going into battle.
yes.
It's more of, put a picture of a kid there, and what would you want for that kid if that was yours?
No, I agree with you. Listen, the CSE, it's always been an adversarial, when I was a parent going through, it was always an adversarial process, very uncomfortable, as Mrs. Corrido says, with the acronyms and everything else. So, perhaps through these roundtables and discussions, there's a way to make it more parent-friendly or user-friendly, or whatever you want to call it. But again, we thank you for the way you're approaching this. It is so much more productive this way than certain other ways that people try to approach us with ideas. So, Dr. Murphy, let's set that round table, and Kerry, please stay involved.
Thank you, I'd like to be.
Yeah, and we'd like you to be. So,
Thank you.
all right, thank you.
Can I just ask one question about the 20% tests and quizzes? Don, Dr. Murphy, is that true with most of these classes, where like a test and quizzes only count 20% or 30% of the grade?
It depends on the course and the breakdown of the grade book, but no, tests were normally more than that, but I don't want to generalize because it does depend on the.
I mean, it depends on the course,
normally,
the teacher, and everything else, I guess.
Yeah.
It's what in my investigations and the kids that I've been helping out, when, the teachers have been saying they're doing so good, and I researched, okay, well, they got a 64 average, and then how could this be? That's when I found out about the 20%, let's say, in social studies and English, and I believe maybe science, but I can't attest to that. So I I don't know if it was across the board or,
Yeah, I've heard social studies in English it's the
yeah,
same with that the test scores are very low compared to everything else.
yeah, and then it's all the fluff. You get
Yeah.
100 just for coming to class and, you know, writing anything,
No,
basically.
I mean, there's participation grades, maybe talking about quizzes, tests are traditionally worth much more in the grade book, but even that could be part of the data we look at as part of our roundtable.
Yeah, but that's just this year. Any other year, it's been where the grades are worth more. It seems to be dropping every year, the percentage. But yeah, that's definitely something to talk about.
Sure.
Yeah, so Kerry, we do feel like as a district, we are doing better since Ms. Bilski's been in her position, but let's continue to work together to continue to improve. So, thank you. Any other questions and comments from anyone related to the district whatsoever?
There are.
Yep, so if you could moderate or whatever you want to call it, the questions.
Sure, so Dr. Howard, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I believe you touched upon this. There were a couple of questions related, just generally asking about 5th grade moving up, 8th grade, 12th grade graduation. I just didn't know if you wanted to repeat yourself quickly in case anyone missed it.
Sure. Just to say again that Dr. Murphy and I met in a Zoom meeting today with 2 representatives from the Department of Health reviewing these newest guidelines that were released just on Friday. We're doing everything we can to move as quickly as possible to get our heads around them, make sure we understand the details. And as soon as we are able to communicate what the plans will be within those guidelines, we will surely do so. But I'd like all the parents and students to rest assured that we are fully committed to providing commencement ceremonies and proms and stepping up ceremonies and moving up ceremonies that our students have worked so hard for. We believe the recognition is important. We will not take any shortcuts regarding these ceremonies. So please trust us. We'll be working on it and we'll get word out to everybody as quickly as is possible.
And that applies to other events that are traditionally part of our end of the year at different levels that they're still being looked at and principals are talking about it, right? Just field trip, well, there's no field trips, but anything like that falls under that same category. Am I right?
Yeah, it does. As a matter of fact, we've had some field trips starting to go out again. So just Mrs. Pirro and I had a conversation today about a 5th grade field trip to Adventureland. So wherever we can be within the guidelines and do things safely, we're doing that.
Okay, next question. This is from Tara Vasquez, and what I asked Dr. O'Hara was a combination of a few questions also. Are there any plans to revise COVID protocols at the elementary level or for the upcoming school year? We talked about that briefly, that based upon guidance and forthcoming guidance next year, we'll know better in the coming months what that looks like. Ms. Vasquez also asked about who are the candidates that will be on the ballot for the board member election on May 18th. Mrs. George confirmed that ballots are due by Monday, and so we'll know that answer after Monday. Mrs. Sorry if I messed this up, Argyros, will Hauppauge have the space needed to accommodate new students who will be moving into the area due to the new housing? And asked about class sizes in relation to that, especially at the elementary level. Dr. O'Hara, did you want to?
Well, just for clarity, are we talking about the apartments? We're not sure?
I assume so. It just says new housing.
Okay. I mean, we have a lawsuit existing as far as the apartments go, but go ahead, Dr. O'Hara, if you know.
Yeah, you know, I mean, our class sizes are in good shape. Our buildings can accommodate more students. It's just all relative to the 6-foot distancing, the 3-foot distancing. But in normal times, we're not experiencing or anticipating overcrowding. So it's just a matter of managing what it looks like as we approach September with guidelines and constraints regarding the pandemic.
Mrs., again, I apologize if I say this wrong, Rohasi asked a similar question and also referenced the houses at the 111, 347 intersection and asked about the apparent impending sale of Whippoorwill. So I don't know if we want to address the Whippoorwill sale as part of her question. She
Dr.
just,
Murphy, 111, 347 is 55 and older.
that's her question.
Yeah, so that development is 55 or older, and the developer that is possibly going to develop it here is also 55 and older. So there would not be additional children, but there would be an additional tax base.
Mrs. Rohasi and Ms. Rudden both asking about if Whippoorwill is sold, where will the offices be relocated, referring to administration?
Yeah, so this is speaking with administration, and Dr. O'Hara, I don't know if you want to chime in on this, but administration, I guess, was semi-excited about having offices in the buildings with the kids, but we hadn't really talked whether it's going to be middle school or high school yet, but can you touch on that, Dennis?
Well, what I could add is, through Joe's office, the board may recall we contracted with Western Suffolk BOCES to do an enrollment study, and they're also helping us with a facility study. And we'll be using, the board in the future will be using that information along with the administration to determine the best location for offices. I think one of the questions I saw on the sheet was regarding money used to create offices. So obviously there'll be revenue from the sale of the building, and some of that revenue will have to be used to create new office spaces. But again, rest assured, there'll be appropriate office space for all those who need it within the district.
And just for a quick note about the timeline of the sale, as we've said multiple times over these meetings, any sale of any district property, any sale of Whippoorwill will go before the voters as part of a referendum to the entire community. If it is approved, we're not talking about closing on the property until mid-2024. So nothing is imminent in that regard.
And Dr. O'Hara just answered the last question there, which was from Mrs. Rudden asking about administrative offices.
Is that the last question?
Yeah, that was the last one.
Okay. Any follow-up from anyone in the community that's here tonight from any of those questions? Anything more from the board? Dan, do we have executive session executive session issues? Just say yes or no. Let's not get it. Yeah.
We have one item regarding collective bargaining.
Okay, so with that, I'll take a motion to retire into executive session to, Gene, what's the exact language?
To discuss negotiations with the UPSU unit.
To discuss negotiations with the UPSU unit. Mr. Dr. Crapper with the motion, and Mr. Fortmeyer with the second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, thank you. Gene voted. 6-0 plus the attorney. We will go into executive session in exactly 5 minutes. Our next meeting is May 4th, 2021. It's the budget hearing and business meeting. Thank you all so much. Good night.